FlyWire on the road, Sun and Fun 22. I'm with Dan Gryder here today. This is actually the last day of Sun and Fun, and we're going to talk about aviation safety videos on YouTube. So stick with us on FlyWire. Hey, I'm Scott Perdue, and Dan Gryder and I are going to talk about aviation safety videos. It seems to be some of the big things that we both do, so we're going to talk about that a little bit. And it's a beautiful day here at Sun and Fun. The wind's not blowing. It was blowing like stink and really cold, and it was like 46 degrees this morning. Yeah. You slept outside with your airplane on the ground. Hardcore, no tent, anything. Did you get a little dewy?
It did.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So you didn't need to take a shower, you just kind of roll around and use soap.
I need a hot shower. And I was in the lake all day yesterday. So, not all day. Yesterday afternoon I was in the lake, so I was chilled to the bone.
Yeah, I bet. Well, cool. So we were talking yesterday about the aviation safety videos. So what's your take on it? How are we going in the right direction? Are we doing the right things? Do we need to fix anything or do anything different?
Well, I'm Johnny come lately to the YouTube world, but the phenomena that I've seen in aviation YouTubers is a whole different array of what your subject's going to be, either humor or travel or something like that. You and me and Juan and a couple others tend to home in on accident type stuff, and I think it's really educational. I don't know that there's a tremendous amount of people out there doing YouTube videos like you and I do, and we each have our different styles and personalities on it, but there's only a handful of us out there doing it. However, we're really doing well on views and minutes watched, so it gives me the sign that people are actually interested in learning maybe from something that somebody else did.
Yeah, I think you're right. A lot of the comments I tend to get on mine are people saying that, well, I appreciate what you're doing. It's really learned a lot, and keep doing what you're doing. It helps. There's probably saved a life, and I sure hope that's the case.
Yeah. I got a couple emails from a couple of different accidents, specifically that one out in Oregon where the couple died in the Bonanza. But I got an email from the pilot's brother that just said, thank you. We've had no information from the government, no information from anybody. We had no idea how they died until your video, and now it all makes perfect sense. And it gave us closure. Now we understand exactly what he did, and the whole story makes complete sense. And to them, it's bad to have to talk about how those two people died, but they're the kind of pilots, if I went in, I would want everybody to know what it is that Dan did to go in, and don't do that. So I think there's some educational benefit that people are really looking for out there.
I think you're right. I get a lot of those comments as well. I've actually gotten several a lot of them from family members, as you said, that were involved, and they appreciated the analysis, because it just takes forever from the NTSB, and then you really, basically most of the analysis you get from them is in the prelim.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, I hear it over and over, if your family or somehow was involved in a fatal accident, the interaction between the government and the family after the accident is zero. There's no follow-up call, there's no follow-up anything. They don't have a counselor, there's nobody that calls the family left behind on the planet to say, here's what happened, here's what we know so far, can we answer any questions? Never happens. You get absolutely zero, and then the family finally looks it up on the internet 3 years later and tries to make heads or tails out of NTSB's probable cause. And I think the whole thing it needs to be picked up a little bit in speed, and there needs to be better closure for these families and figuring out what really happened to Uncle Steve. How did he die?
Yeah, true statement. I think one thing about how I pick accidents to review is, for me, I think it needs to be, it's never about the pilot. It's always about what the pilot did with the emergency. I mean, what failed on the engine, or, it doesn't really, none of that is important to me. It's what the pilot did afterwards, and what lesson can we learn, so if we're in the same situation, we would be able to more aptly deal with it instead of it being a surprise. So when I pick a video, that's what my objective is. And then I need to be able to actually find out about independently, not
Right.
relying on somebody else. But and ADSB is really a good source for this to figure out what happened with the flight, so I can put two and two together. I don't like listening to other people. Eyewitnesses are good, but sometimes they're not accurate,
Right.
and their view is limited. So they can add a piece to the puzzle, but not necessarily the whole answer. But another thing that I'm trying to figure out how to do is actually do a quick look early on an accident, and then as more information gets there, then do my analysis. Because when I do an analysis, it takes a lot of time.
Yeah, they do.
To do, and a lot of time to edit too.
Yeah. Oh, it's so time consuming. But that's the one thing that I've noticed from being involved on an amateur basis like I am. NTSB came from several other organizations in government that preceded them. NTSB only came along around in like 1967 or something like that. But in the early days of aviation, you have to think about it, all the accidents were caused by mechanical, and the pilots were actually pretty good. It was very rare that there was an actual pilot error. It was always something mechanical that they needed to fix. A flap fell off, or an engine failed, or something like that, where they could go back and say, well, these cylinders need to be stronger, or this need. And so that process has actually helped the reliability of engines. However, we're in a new hemisphere now. Most of the accidents are simply something the pilot did wrong, although there are some failures. But the NTSB continues to home in on what spring failed, which caused the engine to fail. And at this point, I don't really care what spring failed. How did the pilot handle the engine failure? That's all I want to know, because it doesn't really matter. We've got our engines and airplanes up to very reliable.
Well, it's modern aircraft engines, although the basic design is very old, they're very, very reliable. When you think about operating an engine 65-75% power for hours and hours and hours at a time,
Right.
You could not do that with a car engine.
Yes, let me ask you a question. Airplane takes off, guy has an engine failure, and he stalls it and spins it because the engine failed and had a manufacturer's defect. What's the probable cause? Was the probable cause that aircraft fatal? Was it the engine or the pilot?
The probable cause that NTSB always does is, okay, this is where the cause of the accident.
Right.
But if the engine failed and he was able to land and then not damage, not as a fatality,
Right.
then it's almost an incident and they don't care.
Right.
And so my thing is what's more important to me is what happens after.
Exactly.
It's not I don't care about the engine. I don't care about any of the mechanical issues.
Yeah.
You're in a position, how as a pilot am I going to deal with that? Because that's the only thing that's really important, I think,
Right.
to people that are flying is if this happens to me, what am I going to do? What do I need to do?
Right. And at that point, it doesn't really matter what caused your little engine to fail. All you need to know is how to lower the nose and find a spot, and you're gonna do some damage, but you're gonna be able to unbuckle and step out and go to dinner with your family. That's all it is. And I think the NTSB's still focus today is purely on finding what little tiny component inside that airframe let them down, and homing in on that, as opposed to what the guy could have done about it if he had proper training and was ready to handle that.
Yeah, I agree. And I just did a video a little while ago on a fellow who was flying an 835 Bonanza.
Yeah.
And he had a fuel. It was actually the fuel pressure gauge line. It was a hard line in between two hard connections, so
Yep.
it was almost. It's original,
Right.
but it was almost prepped for failure because of that kind of connection. It needs to be a soft connection, a flexible hose, but that cracked. And that reduced his fuel pressure to near zero on a
Right.
pressure carburetor, and his engine still ran sorta, but had no power, not enough to fly.
Right.
He actually did a really, really good job of putting it down on a road in the middle of the forest in Georgia. And I loved being able to talk about those kind of situations where was he perfect? No. I mean, even if you think about this a lot, you're not going to be perfect.
Right.
But he did a really excellent job, and they walked away.
Yeah.
And then hit power lines that are really tough to see just before landing. But as a testament to the Bonanza's strength, it actually cut right through them.
Yeah.
And
Well, we're not getting better, and AOPA came out and made a bold statement at the end of 2021 that said that the year 2021 was their best year ever, and they gave themselves a pat on the back for being the best safety year in general aviation forever. And they said that they're not sure to attribute that to, but sure seemed like they wanted to take a lot of credit for it. Truth is, we did not do better in 2021. I've got all the numbers, I haven't published them yet. We actually did more crashes and more dead bodies in 2021 than we ever have. Now, that goes back to AOPA's method of determining rates based on how many 100,000 hours that we flew, which is a complete pie in the sky number. I don't really care anything about how many 100,000 hours we flew. I just want the total number of fatalities, which currently is running about 18 per month. Why don't we back that off from 18 a month down to about 6 a month? Would be a lot better. Well, no matter how many hours we're flying, let's not crash quite so many airplanes. That's fatals. 18 fatal accidents per month.
That's too many. And what he's driving at is one of my problems. In the Air Force and the airlines, you know how many hours you fly. Every sortie is logged. I mean, there's just incredible record keeping going on. So when they do and the correct statistical number to measure your accident rates is per hours flown. But when you don't have a good way to track that, it's all a guess. And GA flying, you have no idea, no way to track how many hours are being flown. I don't care if you're using hours that are reported on people's medicals, which is one of those metrics. There's how much avgas is being sold, and all this stuff. You're guessing at number of hours are being flown. So that accident rate that they're using in the null report, I think, is bogus. Frankly, the statistical basis for it is specious.
And not only that, the null report runs at least 3 years behind. The most current null report that's on my desk right now is 2019, and we're in 2022 right now. 2019 null report is the most current one we have, and that's what they're basing everything on for everything up to there. I'm not sure where McSpadden got his numbers saying 2021 was the safest year we've ever had, because those numbers aren't even published anywhere. How many 100,000 hours we flew in 2021, nobody knows that. That's a number that hasn't even been given out yet. So,
well, and it's a guess anyway. That's my point. It's a total guess, and I don't think you can make a statistical decision using those statistical bases.
Not in GA. There's no way to know how many 100,000 hours. And rough numbers, one fatal accident per 100,000 hours flown in GA. That rate is about 18 fatals per month. So the NTSB has always said, well, our goal is to keep it below 1.0. Well, you got to keep in mind 1.0 per 100,000 hours is still 18 a month, and that number, that 1.0, hasn't really flickered over the last 20 years. It's always been 0.95, 1.1, 1.0. If you look at it, it's a pretty flat line for forever. What I'm hoping to do is eventually get that 1.0 down to 0.3 or something like that.
And what we're really trying to do is we're trying to raise awareness and for people to think a little bit more about their flying and about their training, because I'm a big training proponent. I think one of the big ways that we reduce accident rates is we do more training. And training's not a bad word. It's not a nasty word. It's not 4 letters.
No.
So it's something that I learned when I was doing I actually did the statistics on my hours flown, and it's particularly in the Air Force. 97% of my flying in the Air Force to train for what I did 3% of the time.
Oh yeah. No,
and I think that training, I'm not saying you do the same thing in GA, but in the $100 hamburger, have a professional, or it's a word I'm having trouble with this morning, but have one of your proficiency exercises that you do. On every flight you do, have something that you go and practice. And that's what training is about, is practicing all the different proficiency maneuvers.
That and eliminating the surprise. Almost every fatal is caused by a surprise. A pilot that got surprised because they didn't know what was about to happen. If we can eliminate the surprise and have pilots ready for the scenarios that are about to befall them, then you stand a chance of handling it. If you're totally shocked and surprised, you're not going to handle it.
And that's what these videos are for, and you'd think about that here on the ground, not in the air.
Yeah, well, this is my standby byline. I would say we're not inventing any new ways of killing ourselves in GA. It's one of the 20 every single time. No one's ever been killed by the steep turn or the Shondell. You can do a steep turn if you like, doesn't do you any good. You're going to get killed by one of the 20 AQP maneuvers. That's how you're going to die. Why don't you learn about them and be proficient in those and be ready so that there is no surprise? That's my whole beef. And I think YouTube, the phenomena, and I'm a fledgling in the YouTube world. I'm a complete lack of tech, lack of PC, I'm lack of everything. But I've been surprised how many, even walking around here, it's amazing how many people say, Dan, they've seen me on YouTube. YouTube is the social media, and I don't do anything on Instagram or TikTok or anything like that, but the number of people here. So I think you and I and some of the others out there are being effective in raising awareness. I think people are hungry for accident reviews where they can learn something, where they can help themselves prevent.
Yeah. So I'll keep doing them.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Let's keep on doing them.
All right. Well, there you have it. From Sun and Fun. It's a little bit chilly this morning, but hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you next time.
On FlyWire.
Great.